Hi everyone, I'm Chef Susie with Escoffier Online and welcome to our live session this morning. Today we're going to be making English muffins. They're super easy to make. I'm sure that we've all had an English muffin somehow at one point for breakfast or another time of day. They're just a really nice flat little biscuit and they are leavened with yeast, so we're going to be making a sponge. We're going to be handling the dough the same that we do a typical yeast dough. This dough is going to be sticky. It's going to be a little bit wetter, and that's how we're going to get those nice little pockets and little crevices that are inside of the classic English muffin. So knowing all that, let's get started. So since we're going to be making a yeast dough, we are going to first start by making a sponge, and I've got some fresh cake yeast here. And you can use dry yeast. You can go ahead and substitute that if you have some active dry yeast. And I'm just going to be dissolving this in some warm water, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of flour. Then we're going to set this aside and we're going to leave it, bubble a little bit and become active. Then we're going to be making the mixture, which is just going to be some bread flour, some sugar, not too much. They're a little on the sweet side. And we'll add a little bit of egg and some water and a little bit of salt, and that's it then. We've got a little bit of butter in there too. So let's go ahead and make our sponge. We're going to use this whip. Okay, I'm just going to be adding a little bit more than a half of a cup of water and about a half cup of flour. And be mindful, if your dough is a little bit sticky, you can add just a little bit more flour, but you're going to want to be careful with that. You don't want to make the dough too firm, because you want those nice pockets that we talked about. So let's go ahead and add just a little bit more water. Okay, next I'm going to be adding a little bit of flour. And we will be ready to go. And please let me know if you have any questions along the way. So this is just a nice, real simple little sponge. We're just going to be setting this aside at room temperature. And so that's a little thick. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit more water to this. So if you notice too that your dough is not real sticky, you'll want to add a little bit more water too. Okay, so this is a really nice looking sponge to start with. So this gets set aside until it starts to become active, get a little bit of foaming. And I have a sponge that I made earlier, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so I've got a sponge that I made earlier. And it's become active. It's increased in size, and we're going to use this one to make our dough. So let's talk about what's going into this dough. So we've got some bread flour. We're going to go ahead and put that in our mixer. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Chef Susie?
Yes.
I have a question. If we were using the packet of yeast, how many would that be equal?
Well, I used about 1 ounce of the fresh cake yeast, and usually you're going to be using about 1/3. So you'll use about 1/3 of an ounce. I'm not sure how much the packets are, but you can weigh that on your scale.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome. But typically always think about the conversion as being 1/3. And if you're switching your recipe from dry yeast to cake yeast, you're going to times it by 3. So that's just approximate, and there are different sources that are going to give you a little bit of information, but that's just my general rule of thumb.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we've got our our bread flour in the mixer. So we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of butter here, and then I'm going to break this up a little bit before we add the sponge. So this is super easy. This fat is going to, tenderize the biscuit, and it's going to add some flavor to it too. Actually, not the biscuit, the English muffin. Okay, we're just going to break this up a little bit, get it started, get it a little mealy. And I've got my sugar. I'm going to go ahead and add that as well. So it's super easy dough to make. You'll find different recipes, different sources. Some English muffin recipes don't have butter in them, some don't have eggs, and some will have milk. So it's really the recipe that you like. I think this is a really good recipe to start with. It's very basic. It's got the butter in it, and it's got the eggs, and it gives it a lot of flavor and some softness to it too. So let's go ahead and we're going to add our sponge in here. Nice and active, nice and frothy. Okay, so we've got some more ingredients to add here. We've got our salt that's going to go in kind of at the end. And we have our water. What I like to do is like to mix my whole egg in the water a little bit. You can do this with a fork too, or a whisk if you have it. And it gets it incorporated. So let's go ahead and add these liquids, and then we'll be adding our salt last. And please let me know if you have any questions along the way. And like I said, this is going to be a sticky dough. And if it's too firm, go ahead and add a little bit more water. If it's too sticky, you can go ahead and add a little bit more flour, but be careful with that. And since this is pretty delicate, there's really not going to be any kneading. I'm just mixing this until it's incorporated. Okay, so if you decide to make an English muffin dough that doesn't have any butter or egg in it, it's not going to be as yellow as this dough. So this dough has a little bit of yellowness to it. But all recipes are good. I just happen to like this one a little bit better myself. So this dough is nice and sticky. We'll be rolling it out. We're going to be using some flour, but not too much. Okay, what I like to do is just kind of not really knead it, but kind of move it around in the bowl a little bit to make sure all of the ingredients are well incorporated. Okay, so this is going to be set aside like we do our classic yeast doughs, and we are going to let this double in size. And then it's going to be rolled out, and the English muffins are going to be cut. So let me throw some plastic on this. Oh, I don't have my plastic. I'm just going to set it aside, and I'll put some plastic on it later, and I'll use this for later on. So this is going to double in size. So let me wash off my hands real quick. Okay, so do we have any questions on the dough so far? Nope, pretty easy yeast dough. It's, pretty similar to the doughs that we've worked with before. So I have a little bit of dough that I made earlier. It's risen, it's doubled in size, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so for the English muffin, we're going to be rolling your dough to about 1/4 inch thick. We're not going to roll all this dough out. We're only going to roll about half. Okay, so if you want a larger English muffin, you can go ahead and make these a little bit thicker, but generally it's going to be about 1/4 inch thick. Okay, so our dough is it's nice and sticky. We have a little bit of oil because I oiled the bowl a little bit because I was moving this around. So you can press this out or you can roll it out, whatever you like. You only need to get this about 1/4 inch thick. And please let me know if you have any questions. Okay. Maybe I'm going to start with pressing it a little bit, and then we'll go into rolling. So this dough is a little bit, it's a little springy. It might need just a little bit more time to rest.
Chef Susie,
Yes.
what is the calorie content on the kind you're making?
The calorie content on the English muffin that I'm making,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Oh.
But
They're around 100 for the bot. And I'm on a diet.
I would guess that, just guessing, maybe like 125, but I can definitely look it up for you and see if I can find it. And you know, Chef Susie is just a typical pastry chef. She doesn't count her calories. So I
Well,
always
that's
tell
my New
people,
Year's resolution.
I probably should, but I don't. So I always tell people that I'm your pastry chef, not your doctor. So.
Okay.
But I can definitely, I can look it up for you, and we can find it pretty close for you.
Okay.
But that would be my best guess without knowing. But like I said, Chef Susie is not a calorie counter. But that's okay. But you're going to like these a lot. And there's not a real lot of sugar in here, but there, you know, there is some fat from the egg and the flour. But they're not overly sweet. There's only, for the whole mixture, I had about 1 pound, 8 ounces of flour, and I only put about 2 ounces of sugar. So there wasn't a real lot, but the sugar definitely gives it some flavor, that's for sure. Okay, I'm just going to be rolling this a little bit more, and this is a little springy on me. But you're going to want to be careful, because sometimes with our springy doughs, when we cut them, the circles don't stay round. So we've got this about 1/4 of an inch thick. And smells good, smells like a very typical yeast dough. Okay, so nextly what we're going to do is we're going to be cutting these. Okay. So for the English muffin, you will typically cook them in a ring, and this is just a ring that I use for my tarts, and it's 3.5 inches. And if you don't have ring molds, you can also use something like a tuna can. You can cut off the top and the bottom, and you can use that. Or you can bake these free form. They won't hold their shape as well, but they're not going to spread all over the pan. So they'll just be a little bit more rustic looking. So if you don't have this mold, tuna can mold, or even baking it, cooking these free form. So what you're going to want to do is, if you're using any kind of mold like this or the tuna can, you're going to want to grease it so the English muffin doesn't stick. Then you're going to cut those out, and you're going to be putting them on a piece of parchment or a Silpat with some cornmeal on the bottom. And this is going to stop with the sticking, and it's also going to give them a nice crispy crust. And did we have a question?
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how it works, Chef Susie.
Okay.
It's Jolene. My question is, how would you convert it to be whole wheat?
Oh, okay. That is a great question. The question is how to convert this to whole wheat. And for any whole wheat recipe, what I usually do is I'll substitute 1/4 of the flour for whole wheat flour. So you can kind of start there. And as you progress, if you're starting to work with whole wheat, you'll kind of, you'll get a, you'll become more comfortable with it, and you can start trying to add a little bit more, like maybe you can make it half whole wheat again. And whole wheat, a lot of whole wheat is always not for everyone. So I always start out with 1/4 or even 1/3, and then I'll move to half of substituting half of the flour with whole wheat flour. And like I said, if it's something you're not familiar with or your family isn't eating a lot of whole wheat, start out a little bit low, and then you can kind of progress to more whole wheat. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Sorry. My other question was, if you wanted to substitute whole, like the whole thing, whole wheat, is that possible, or is there always some sort of?
You wouldn't want to substitute all the flour with whole wheat flour. I would say maybe half or 3/4 at the most, because yeah, you'll definitely want some of the white flour in there. But even substituting 1/4 or 1/3 will be very significant with the whole wheat. You'll see a really big difference. It's going to have a little bit of a light whole wheat flavor to it and texture, but you'll definitely see a big difference, and especially when you get to using half the flour. So another thing to keep in mind is there are a lot of flecks in the whole wheat flour, and that's going to absorb a lot of liquid. So you may have to increase the liquid, the water in the recipe. So make sure that your dough is sticky like the one that I made, because that's going to make the nice pockets. So almost always when you start substituting more whole wheat, you're going to be needing more liquid. So just be mindful of that. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and cut some of these English muffins. Okay, so my ring that did we have another question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I was wondering, the canning jar lids or rings, can we use those for the molds?
What rings was it? The canning jar rings, you can use those, but I'm pretty sure that as long as it doesn't have like a lip on it, but you could definitely use them. And if it has like a lip, kind of a ring around it, you may have to do a little bit more browning after you unmold after you take the mold off the first time. But if I'm thinking, some of the canning rings that I have, they have kind of a ring around here, around the edge. So what I'm going to be doing is pulling this off during the cooking. So you may have to turn it over and then pull it off after you turn it over. But you can definitely maneuver around with that for sure.
And would we grease the rings?
Yes, always grease the rings. I grease this one with some vegetable spray, and you're definitely going to want to make sure that they're well greased. Okay, so let's go ahead. I've cut my biscuit, and I'm just going to be placing it inside the ring, and then we're going to set these aside and let them proof until they're double in size. What I like to do is I have a 3.5-inch ring, and I like to use a little bit smaller cutter, and this way my English muffins don't get so high. I like to keep mine a little bit on the lower side, but you will see them very high. So it's really what you like. And we're going to be cooking these on the stove top. So if you're doing a thicker dough, make sure that you're keeping your flame down a little bit lower, and keep in mind they're going to cook a little bit longer. But I would say maybe the first time that you're making these, kind of start out with some thinner English muffins. So I have one in the ring mold, and I've got some freeform ones too that I've got prepared. So you can cook these freeformed, and you'll just see that they're a little bit more rustic looking. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on preparing the English muffin, the dough, or the cutting before they're actually cooked? Okay, so we're going to move forward, and I've got a couple of English muffins that I prepared earlier, and they doubled in size. We're going to go ahead and cook one of those real quick. Okay, we're going to set these aside, and it's pretty warm in here. These are proofing pretty good, so we might be able to cook one of those freeform ones too. Okay, so I've got some oil in the bottom of my pan here, and I kind of have a little bit too much, so I'm kind of going to get some of that out of there. And you can easily do these on the stovetop, or you can do them on a griddle. So keep that in mind, but you're going to want to cover them for sure. So if you have a griddle, if you have a cover, or you can even use a cake pan too. So let's go ahead, and we're going to fire up our burner. And we are not going to put this on very high at all because we don't want this English muffin to get too brown on the bottom. Okay, so you can also bake these in the oven, but for me this is the best way to do these on the stovetop. So we're going to let this warm up and be sure that you're using a medium to low flame, especially if you're making an English muffin that's a lot thicker. You're definitely going to want to stick with these lower flames. Okay, any questions? All right. Okay, so I have my lid at hand. Okay, we're going to let this get just a little bit warmer. And we don't want it to brown too much when we first put that in. So I've got a couple of these that I made earlier. We're going to take one out and get it in there. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pick this up. It might get a little bit messed up when you pick it up, but if you've got enough cornmeal on there, should be okay. So you're going to go ahead and put this in your pan, and you're going to put the ring right in there. Okay, any questions? Okay, so now we're just going to kind of let this work on its own, and we're going to cover it up a bit too. And we'll be checking it in just a minute. Like I said, I have it on a very low flame. And please, has anyone made English muffins before? And maybe tell me about your experience if you've made them, or maybe if you've been thinking about making them. Okay, so it's nice and low, and we don't want too much browning. These are going to take, a good like maybe 5 minutes or so to cook all the way through.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do you get the traditional pull apart with the nooks and crannies like on TV? You know how they pull them apart?
With the dough being wetter, that's going to give you more of those pockets on the inside. And the best way to cut an English muffin is with a fork. So as soon as our English muffin is done, we're going to be cutting it with a fork, because if you cut English muffins with a knife, you're kind of putting that nook and cranny texture that you've created at jeopardy. So always cut your English muffin with a fork. So what you'll do is you'll just kind of poke the fork in the sides and go all the way around until it releases. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay, so keeping an eye on this, it's our English muffin is starting to rise a little bit. That means it's cooking. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to check the bottom real quick. And be careful, this ring is pretty hot. I just want to make sure that I'm not getting too brown. Okay, it's just starting to brown a little bit. Like I said, I have this on pretty low. And I think we'll keep it on low. It's pretty hot in there. And then we'll be flipping it over once it gets a little bit browner in color. And it's important to cover these because this is going to help with the cooking. And like I said, if you do this on a griddle, a stovetop griddle, be careful not to get it too hot. It's not going to be quite as hot as what you're doing for pancakes and things like that. And definitely, if you have a cover to use for your griddle, use that, or you can even use a bowl or a cake pan. But if you have something that doesn't have a lid, be careful, it's going to be hot, so use your towels to pick it up. Okay, so our English muffin is coming along. This is kind of a process. As you start making these and you start doing more, you become more comfortable, you'll be a little bit quicker. Okay, so the ring stays on until we flip it over and we have a little bit more structure, and you'll see that it's going to hold its shape really well. Okay, so I'm going to be turning this over in just a minute, And we'll see if there's some nice browning to it, and we'll be taking that ring off too. So to remove your ring, tongs are a really good idea, and just make sure that your tongs are open enough to grab that ring. Okay, so it's looking really good. Classic English muffin look to it. And like I said, you can cook these freeform too. Let's go ahead and remove our ring, and then we are going to be flipping this over. Okay. Okay, so we lost a little bit of our shape. Let's see if this is brown enough. No, we're going to wait for a little bit more browning. I'm going to go ahead and turn the flame up just a little bit. And that's going to help with the browning. So always check before you flip this over. And since we are working kind of slowly, it's going to take a little bit longer to brown. And you just kind of want a little bit of a golden brown color to it. And you want to be careful, not too hot, because you're going to get way too brown on the bottom and the top, and then the center might not be cooked all the way. Okay, so our English muffin's looking good. And I always start out a little bit lower on the heat, and you can always turn it up. Okay. Okay, so it's getting that nice golden brown color to it. And I'm just going to use my fork a little bit to help flip this over. And there we go. Okay, so we're going to cover this up and let it kind of finish up on its own. And then we'll let it cool for a minute, and then I'll go ahead and cut it open. So any questions on the English muffin? Okay, so what you're going to want to be sure that you do is put a little cornmeal on the bottom, and this is going to help with the crispness of the English muffin. Okay, so it's looking great. Let's go ahead and check the other side, see how we're doing. We're getting nice and brown. And we're just going to let it go just a little bit longer. Going to turn down our heat a little bit. So our English muffin, it's perfectly cooked. It's got some nice height to it. It's a nice golden brown color. We're going to take it out of the pan. We're going to put it on a cooling rack to cool. And then I'm just going to show you real quick how to cut this with the fork rather than using the knife. We talked about that earlier. We don't want to use a knife because it can really disturb those nooks and crannies that we created. So let's let this cool off a little bit. And let's talk about some of the things that we can make with the English muffin. You can eat your English muffin toasted. Once it's cut, you can put it in the toaster oven. You can get nice and golden brown in color. You can put butter, you can put flavored butters, you can put jam. You can use the English muffin to make the classic eggs benedict, where you put a poached egg on top, and then you cover the egg with a nice thick rich hollandaise sauce. That's really a nice item for a brunch, and you can make a variety of different sandwiches with this. So it's really limitless. It's kind of a plain dough, and it's just a little sweet, and I've added, like I said, the butter and the eggs, which makes it richer and softer and a little bit more yellow in color. But definitely have fun with your English muffins. Let me know what you're making with them. You can make all kinds of open-faced things. You could make little pizzas with some tomato sauce and cheese. So like I said, limitless. The size is great. You can make them smaller if you like. You can make them larger if you like too. And keep in mind, if you don't have the ring molds, you can cook these freeform, or you can even use a tuna can, cut out the top and the bottom. So now that this has had a chance to cool, let's go ahead and we're going to cut the English muffin. And this is just a real traditional classic way to cut the English muffin. I'm just taking my fork and I'm going around the sides. And just be careful that you leave this cool. If you have a little bit of You know, if it feels a little doughy and it's a little too warm, just let it cool off a little bit more. This one seems to be working out just fine. And by doing this with the fork, you're going to not disturb those nooks and crannies that you've created. So if you run a knife through here like a wavy edge slicer, it's really going to disturb those nooks and crannies that you work so hard to create. So you just kind of go around the sides and then you can kind of pull it apart. Just kind of follow your line a little bit. And this is not something that's going to be real perfect. It's going to be a little bit rustic, so just be mindful of that. And once you kind of go around here and loosen it up a little bit, you can just pull it apart and then you'll see all the nooks and crannies in the English muffin. Let's go ahead and pull this apart. And we have some nice nooks and crannies here. You can see these. So thanks so much for joining me today, and please let me know how you're doing with your English muffins, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.